Calaroga Shark Media.
Hi there, I'm Johnny Mac. Interesting one today. There's not like a lot of critical mass for comedy news, but what I do have is good. So like I can't give you a 20-minute episode, so this might be shorter, but it involves major people, and we'll see if my voice holds out because I just recorded 8 episodes of the other podcast I host, which is 5 Good News Stories. I'm trying to get ahead for the holidays there with that one. Anyway, Katt Williams had this to say about Saturday Night Live.
A lot of times when people are doing an impression of you, they're really showing you how they feel about you. You know what I mean? So for Saturday Night Live to have an impression of me and have a woman do that means they think I'm a bitch. There has never been a person that has been parodied 9 times on Saturday Night Live and yet never been invited other than me. So I, at this point, take it as a badge of honor. I understand how the game goes, and I understand that if you love me, I know why you do. And if you don't with me, I understand why.
Jim Gaffigan was on the Manningcast Monday night. Now, pay attention this week. Jim's going to be doing a lot of press, and I've noticed this more and more. Jim Gaffigan comedy specials, obviously very funny. Jim Gaffigan trying to be funny in the moment doesn't have that skill a lot of other comedians have. If you'd like some evidence of that, listen to Jim Gaffigan on the Manningcast, and it's, here, listen.
To be honest with me, have you ever played to a worse crowd than 2 brothers distracted by a football game?
Well, you know, I feel like, I mean, at least you guys are both wearing the quarter zip, and that is just really encouraging. I feel like the whole, like, is it a Manning thing where you have to wear the quarter zip? You always have to look like you're ready to play golf? Is that it? I love 100%. Everything about the quarter zip. Do your pajamas, do they have a quarter zip on them also? That would be great, right?
So, yeah, I think Jim's a little better writing and performing than maybe doing on-the-cuff stuff there, a way another comedian might successfully have fielded that. The U.S. Sun, so that's the U.S. version of a British newspaper, The Sun, is reporting that Pete Davidson has checked back into rehab as I record this on Tuesday, and I'm recording a little earlier than normal. I'm not seeing this in any of the major sources that I would normally use here, but the U.S. Sun is reporting that Pete Davidson has checked into rehab after a secret romance and breakup with Bachelor alum Maria Georges. An insider said they had a fling before parting ways. The insider says Pete checked into rehab in Florida fairly recently. He flew in on a private jet. He's in pretty bad shape this time around. He's not in a good place. The insider said the check-in was very recent. Well, we know that Pete was on the set of SNL on November 2nd. He was spotted in a restaurant in Kingsport, Tennessee on November 5th. Hasn't been seen since, including his 31st birthday last week. Let's hope Pete is doing okay. In the New York Daily News, Richard Johnson had recently said that Pete has been having trouble booking new projects after canceling his show Bupkis. That show seemed to be doing okay, and then Pete walked away from it. He voluntarily sent payments to his co-stars, including Edie Falco, Joe Pesci, and Bobby Cannavale, for the work that they've lost. According to Richard Johnson, Hollywood is taking a break from Pete Davidson. His management team is trying to book him as guest host of SNL. Johnson says Pete is working on a Netflix comedy special and has some small parts in some movies, but when he canceled Bupkis, the source says Pete canceled himself. I get it. I mean, you know, if you're going to do a development deal and the star is going to walk away, and again, I hope Pete's mental health is fine, but there's also the business aspect of it. If we're going to put all this money into development, we're going to start a show and have a hit show, and you're just going to walk away, nobody's going to want to do business with you. I get it. From the Irish Times, your home for comedy news, John Mulaney was online responding to fans' questions. One fan asked John Mulaney, if you had to choose, what is your favorite John Mulaney special and why? Mulaney responded. Now, what's interesting about this question is that favorite is spelled with a U, and that means that the person is not from America, they are from Great Britain. And as an Irishman, I will not answer your question. Now, we can go all sorts of ways there. We can get into the whole history of Ireland. And I'll point out I'm sourcing this story from the Irish Times, which is probably why they found it interesting. Mulaney then responded to the question with an Irish flag emoji instead of a real explanation. Fans pointed out that Mulaney didn't realize Ireland also uses the British spelling. Some fans were shocked that John Mulaney would proudly claim his Irishness without knowing that fact. Others thought he was just being satirical. Andy Kindler tweeted the following. Now, before I read the tweet, Kindler used to do the Just for Laughs Montreal State of the Industry and was really popular. In the last few years, I found Andy Kindler to be really, really aggressive on Twitter going after people. I don't know if I ever met Andy, and maybe I did it serious, maybe not, I can't actually remember. But here is his tweet. Did Lorne Michaels turn 80? Time to take the remote control away from Grandpa. He hasn't been funny ever. He still criminally takes Writers Guild money for the writing he continues to never do. He let the fascist Trump host the show. He doesn't have an ethical bone in his body. That's Andy Kindler on Twitter. J.K. Rowling had some comments about John Oliver. Recently on Last Week Tonight, Oliver said there were few trans girls competing in schools and there's no evidence they pose any threat to safety or fairness. On Twitter, Rowling said Oliver was, quote, an undoubtedly intelligent person who spouts absolute BS to support something he wants to be true but isn't. Jimmy Kimmel went after Sylvester Stallone. You may have seen that Stallone called Trump the second George Washington. In his monologue, Kimmel said, I guess those punches Rocky took to the head were real after all. Kimmel added, George Washington was the father of our country. Donald Trump is the father of Eric. Big difference there. The Hollywood Reporter did a lengthy interview with Veer Das. Veer said, every time an American comedian complains about getting canceled, I'm like, grab a flight to India. Let me just show you something. Back in 2021, Veer Das performed the Two Indias routine at the Kennedy Center. During that routine, he said, I come from an India where we worship women during the day and gang rape them at night. Politicians from India's ruling party accused him of defaming the nation and filed criminal charges. In his last Netflix special, he said, I had 7 criminal complaints filed against me, was being charged with sedition and defaming India on foreign soil. I was called a terrorist on 3 different news channels in the primetime news. Now that's an interesting conversation with your mother that evening. The Hollywood Reporter said, hey, you grew up around the world, Nigeria, India, the U.S. Where does your comedy perspective come from? I like this answer a lot, Veer Das said. It's definitely a misfit perspective, but ironically, I think that opens you up to a lot more freedom because as comedy becomes more ideologically influenced and people have dogs in the race, I get to show up and be like, I have no dog in the race. I'm not from here. I'm not really from anywhere, and that's how I see you, which I think a lot of outsiders don't get to do. They don't get to show a country back to itself. I get to be this misfit whose only agenda is friendship. I get to talk about Americans with a lot more freedom than American comics. I'm not voting in your election. I'm not part of the woke crowd. I'm not part of this alpha male wing of comedy either. The Hollywood Reporter was curious what sort of TV he grew up on, and he said, I grew up in Africa. In Lagos, we got something called Bok TV, which was Botswana TV. I remember being 6 and 7 and watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and The Cosby Show. I remember watching Richard Pryor specials and Eddie Murphy's Raw and Delirious. We moved back to India and cable TV arrived from abroad. 2 soap operas in particular, The Bold and the Beautiful and Santa Barbara, were massive in India. I went to college in Illinois where I discovered stand-up. The first Comedy Central half hour started coming up. My guys were George Carlin for sure, Eddie Zard for how he could make you feel like he was making it up all on the spot when in fact it was meticulously written and rehearsed, yes. And Richard Pryor for showing how to bring vulnerability and pain into comedy. So those are my big 3, Carlin, Izzard, Pryor. Well, Veer, do you still take inspiration from other comedians? He said, absolutely. When I saw what Bo Burnham did with his special Inside, I was a little ticked. That's so good, I thought. I got to step my game up. I don't watch a lot of stand-up because I can usually see the punchline coming. Yeah, I feel you, brother. But when something's visually very interesting or narratively very interesting, I get in on it. I'd watch any Mike Birbiglia special for sure. Just admire the structure and craft. All right, I guess I had a little more today than I thought. Not too much on the back end here, though, to be honest. Wanda Sykes announced a tour. It is called Please and Thank You. Special guest Keith Robinson. 9 cities kicks off March 21st in San Antonio. She'll play Dallas, Chicago, Phoenix, Miami, and more. Wraps up in St. Petersburg May 18th. And maybe I should have paired this story up with the Veer Das story, but I don't think any of us are too familiar with the comedy of Yash Rathi. Well, Yash faces a 3-month jail sentence if he's found guilty of using obscene words or acts under India's criminal code. He's being investigated for police for using bad language on stage after being reported by the people who booked him. Yash Rathi had performed at the Indian Institute of Technology. He was booked to play the annual festival, performing to students, their parents, and staff. A clip posted online shows him talking about, doing stuff to yourself that makes yourself happy. You know what I mean? The clip shows shocked audience members putting fingers in their ears to block out his words. It shows the staff removing the comic from the stage half an hour into his hour-long set when it was clear he was causing offense. The local police superintendent told the Hindustani Times that it was the college's management who reported the stand-up to the police. Reports say the student union, as well as political and religious groups, had also complained to the college's management. The director of the college, I think it is, said during the show when Rathi allegedly started using objectionable words, the Institute management intervened and asked him to get down from the stage. Stand-up comedy acts were held during the Institute's annual fest in the past, but such language was never used by performers. We were shocked when Rathi used such language. The official added that comedians would not be booked for the festival again. Rathi posted a copy of the report on Instagram and said apparently adults in front of adults use language that's not right to use. And that is your comedy news for today. If you enjoy the program, tell a friend about it. If you would like the program without commercial interruption, there's a link in the show notes to tell you how to do that. Short version, $5 a month. Get this one and 20 plus others on the network without ads, including 5 good news stories, of which I had just recorded 8 episodes. And what do you know? My voice actually held up. Good news for me. See you tomorrow.